תודה רבה לחביבה, לדבורה, למארגני הכנס. תודה רבה על המפגש הזה. I wanted to share with you the legacy of Colonel J.R. Elyashar, and the topic of my presentation today is to show how J.R. Elyashar and how the J.R. Elyashar Center was founded to fill a vacuum in the study of Sephardi heritage at the time when, to my knowledge, only Ben Tzvi Institute was known for its research on Sephardi and Oriental Jews. The establishment of the Elyashar Center at Gurion University, I consider it a historic milestone in the annals, not only in our university, but also in Israel political life, and to a great extent in my personal and professional career. Now I explain what I mean. As a Sephardi Jew living in the United States in the 1960s and early 1970s, I experienced life as a minority within a minority. But my PhD thesis, which dealt with the contribution of the army to national integration in Israel, made me understand how the Israeli model then differed from that of the United States, where cultures were not judged, but allowed to share in the multicultural landscape of the American culture and society. My PhD thesis, which soon after appeared in a book form, seemed to have reached the World Sephardi Federation offices in the United States, and also caught the attention of Mr. Sam Rothberg, who was the chairman of the board of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and very much involved in the affairs of the State of Israel. Both were impressed with my simple thesis that Israel should abandon the absorption, so-called absorption policy, and adopt the integration in which both parties, Ashkenazi and Sephardi, should learn from each other and not only one from another, and also to consider both cultures legitimate and equal to each other without one being superior or inferior to the other. As a result, both the World Sephardi Federation and Mr. Rothberg encouraged me to make Aliyah and to try to apply my thesis through the World Sephardi Federation offices in Israel, the World Zionist Organization, where I was a co-founder of the Department of Sephardi Communities in the Diaspora. To persuade me to take the trip, Mr. Rothberg arranged for me an appointment at the Institute of African and Middle Eastern Studies at the Hebrew University, just in case the Sephardi contingency did not work out. At the time of my Aliyah in the mid-70s, ethnic stereotypes abound in Israel. But more important was the so-called social gap that characterized Israeli society and was pronounced in all walks of life. This was the time of the Black Panthers movement, a protest group mainly Moroccan, which rose against poverty and discrimination in Musrara, a pre-1967 border district of Jerusalem. And now, as you can see, the Simta is called "They Are Not Nice," Hem Lo Nechmadim. That's what Golda Meir at the time called the Black Panthers and the Black Panther movement in Jerusalem. This perceived inferior and marginal status of the Mizrahim in the Israeli society prompted world Jewry and Sephardi Jews from the United States to intervene initially during Rabin's first government, and then with Begin, who took seriously the challenge of changing this status of Mizrahi Jews in Israeli society through a program called Project Renewal. The aim of the program was first and foremost to alleviate the crowded housing of Mizrahim who had bigger families and unable to fend for themselves. However, some of us believed and fought for different priorities, like combating prejudices and stereotypes through cultural and social reforms. We believed that education will break down the barriers between First and Second Israel, as it was called then. In fact, it did not take long before the Knesset Committee of Education and Culture passed a resolution in 1976 to establish a center for the integration of the study of Oriental Jewish heritage. Let me just go back to show you. This is where the 1976 has been announced to establish these kind of centers in the universities. Its mandate, in fact, was to allot a sum of money to universities in Israel to open programs like this one here at Ben Gurion to teach courses in Oriental and Sephardi heritage, to hold conferences, workshops, and to publish and disseminate material. And here the story of Colonel J.R. Elyashar unfolds. After the first contact made by Ben Gurion University, I was sent in the summer of 1981 on a mission to meet the colonel and to see if I could convince him to donate money to establish a center in his name that will not only serve to promote Sephardi Jewish culture, but also through it to fight cultural and national prejudices in Israel, and thus to achieve an integrated and multicultural society in which community can share and contribute to its development. But I soon realized that the Colonel Elyashar was not a newcomer to the Sephardi issue. And in fact, he was active in solving the problem facing Israel long before, and even wrote about it as early as 1950. In the dedication ceremony to the center on January 11, 1982, I reiterated what he has written then in 1950, and I quote. He said, "I visited Sephardi congregations throughout the United States, from New York to California, and spoke to many thousands in their synagogues and clubs. With the proper leadership and guidance, they could be united for the good purposes, such as keeping alive our Sephardi language and heritage, and for helping Sephardim in Israel. An active liaison should be established," he said, "among the various groups of Sephardim all over the world for the promotion of literature, music, and other cultural pursuit, blending our inheritance from Spain with modern cultural development." End of quote. When I met J.R. Elyashar in New York on a Thursday afternoon in 1981, I was impressed by his unpretentious office, humble appearance, humility, affection, and warmth towards his Sephardi heritage. I felt my job would be easy, but not before I was asked by him to recite the hymns of Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, in which he joined me with wetted eyes. At the end of our session together, he asked me to come the following day, Friday, to see him again. Let me just roll the program that we established then before Elyashar Center was established. So he asked to come the following day, Friday, to see him again. When I came, he called Harriet, then his secretary, and asked her to prepare a check for an amount to establish a center, or the center. We bargained, but at the end, we agreed on the sum. When she informed him that there were no sufficient funds in the account, he impatiently asked her to get the check book of the other account, and the same scene repeated itself. Now he became really impatient, and Harriet was told to sell stocks to cover the amount, upon which she retorted that the New York stock market, exchange market, was closed then. He returned to me and asked me if I could come the following Monday to receive 2 checks, which I did. You can rest assured that not only I did not sleep well that Shabbat, but I prayed longer and more intensely than any other Shabbat that I can remember. The J.R. Elyashar Center was dedicated on January 11th, 1982, and attended by Mr. Elyashar and Mrs. Anna Elyashar, the president of the university, the rector, deans of different faculties, the mayor of Beersheba, and the deputy foreign minister of the state. In that ceremony, the rector, Professor David Wolf at the time, stated, among other things, that the Elyashar Center, quote, more than any other specific field of academic activity, symbolizes the very uniqueness of the Gurion University of the Negev, dedicated to serving the social and cultural needs of the Negev's diverse communities, most of them of Sephardi ethnic background. This center will not only enhance the self-appreciation and identification of our Sephardi students with regard to their rich cultural history, but will also disseminate research. Thus, contribution to mutual understanding, social integration, and the cultural enhancement of the entire Israeli people, end of quote. My affiliation with BGU in 1978 began as a lecturer, as it was said by our chairman here, chairperson, as a lecturer in international relations and political science. At the time, there was no department of politics. At the time, Yosef Tubi, since he is at Haifa University, was leaving BGU as head of the program for the study of Oriental Jewish heritage. I was asked to replace him as the head of the program. In a way, I saw that the fulfillment of my dream and the implementation of my thesis model. As you see from the slides of the program, between 1977 and 1982, the program for the study of Oriental Jewish heritage offered more than 22 courses each year, some of which are the first of their kind in any university in Israel or elsewhere. Among these were courses in Ladino language, Judeo-Espanol for beginners, and culture. This was taught first by Alicia Baruch and subsequently by others such as Moshe Shaul, Matilda Cohen Serrano, and now Eliezer Papo at the Gaon Center. Other teachers in the program included Tamar Alexander, Hadassah Shai, Ben-Zion Dgani, Yosef Tubi, Menachem Ben Sasson, Avraham Chaim, Tzvi Yehuda, Chaim Beinart, Bracha Zak, Yosef Salmon, Ephraim Chazan, Renee Levi Melamed, Iraqi Klorman, Tzvi Zohar, and myself, just to mention a few. When the funding from the University of Education and Culture dried up, it was, from all these basic courses that we taught, it was the J.R. Elyashar Center that picked up the tab, and during the following 20 years, those courses were expanded to include philosophy, literature, history, anthropology, music, and of course, Ladino. Ladino language and culture as part of a BA curriculum. You can imagine the surprise of the faculty when I introduced courses in Ladino in Beersheba. Their first reaction was, who would be interested in Ladino in Beersheba? There are no Ladino speakers here, they claimed. It took 1 semester before the courses for beginners and later advanced had to be closed within the first couple of hours after they were opened because of over-registration. For over 5 years, Matilda Cohen-Serrano has taught advanced Ladino language, has produced Ladino textbooks, books of proverbs, several storybooks, and Ladino dictionaries that are used today around the world. My challenge was not only the curriculum of the 2 programs, but the faculty that could teach them. At the time, during the 1980s, faculty members who were trained in these fields of Sephardi Oriental studies were few and scattered all over Israel. 1 course here, 1 course there, in some departments. It was difficult to convince these faculty members to come down from the north or center of the country to come south to Beersheba to teach a course or 2. But they came. Years later, the current president of the Hebrew University, Menachem Ben Sasson, reminded faculty members of Sephardi studies at a meeting held at Ben Tzvi Institute that all of those who are teaching today in Israeli universities have taught one time or another at Elyashar Center. So they all came, thanks to the funding at the time of the J.R. Elyashar Center. The center, however, did not only offer courses, but also held study days, and conferences on subjects unbeknown before the Israeli Academy. These included conferences on Indian Jews, on Ethiopian Jews, on Algerian Jews, on the earthquake of Agadir in South Morocco, a first conference ever held in Israel, and was attended by surprise from European countries who lost their dear ones in the earthquake. Libyan Jews under Italian colonialism, Zionism in North Africa, and on the Holocaust and its effects on North African and Balkan Jewry, on literature, on Kabbalah and music, conferences and study days. In this sense, I consider Elyashar Center to be a pioneer in many fields of Sephardi and Oriental studies. This is the legacy of J.R. Elyashar. I'm proud to have been part of it and to have contributed in promoting what was dear to both our hearts, the forging of a more integrated Israeli society. Today, more than 30 years after the establishment of the Elyashar Center, we can say with confidence that Sephardi and Oriental culture is part of the mainstream of Israeli culture and society. Not because it was accepted by the public, but because it is now better understood what it stands for, what are the values of this culture, what is its history, what has been its role in Jewish life over the centuries, and what can be its contribution today to Judaism. It's no longer absorption, but integration, which now characterizes Israeli society, albeit, as we all know, there is still lots of room for improvement. But at least we developed the methods and means by which we can produce a healthier and more homogeneous society.